Foundation last week. I think they were an excellent organization.
You speak in toward the microphone.
I think they were an excellent organization, and hopefully they were helpful for you to put some things in perspective. But at the same time, I just wanted to express my concern for the board's seeming lack of appreciation and support for town golf and the value that it provides to the community. There were some instances in the last, recently, at the town meeting and the last board meeting, or 2 board meetings ago, where there were requests to cut maintenance costs from the already low levels, which affects the golf staff's ability to keep the courses vital and desirable. Golf is an extremely valuable resource provided to town residents and to visitors. Our community's economy is based on hospitality and services. In addition to the beaches, the parks, and the playgrounds, golf contributes to our economic vitality by drawing weekend vacationers that book rooms at our hotels and eat in our restaurants, all of which adds to the hospitality income for the town. By extending the vacation season into the spring and the fall, it keeps our hospitality businesses healthy and our vacation home pricing stable and growing. Golf also provides an added cultural entertainment and physical activity for summer and full-time residents. Many retired residents enjoy the affordable social and physical pleasure in playing a round of golf with friends and visitors, keeping us healthy and active. My concern is illustrated by 2 recent events. When natural disasters like the wind damage this summer or lightning strike a few years ago, the enterprise fund established for golf, as with beaches, parks, and athletic facilities, did not have a contingency in the budget or insurance that would cover the repairs. When the funding for the storm damage came up at the town meeting, I expected the board to support the funding and stand up for it when it was challenged. Other damage is lumped into the general DPW funding. Whether the parks, beaches, or other facilities, it doesn't get the focus, but it is just as necessary. Golf is just as necessary. Even though there is an enterprise fund for golf, it still is a town responsibility to manage and support all town resources, especially from natural disasters. In addition, the past limited funding for maintenance has affected the quality of the courses significantly in the past. As the NFG Consulting pointed out at the board's last meeting, golf course quality is the most important factor in drawing players to fill tee times and provide the revenue to balance expenses. The previous deficit of funding maintenance drove members away and limited visitors' desire to play, given competitive alternatives on the Cape. The request to cut golf course maintenance by $250K at the October 22nd board meeting would affect course quality. Course quality and word of mouth are the most powerful marketing vehicles for golf courses. This would significantly cut the income and cause the deficit you have been trying to avoid. Bayberry Hills is a championship quality course and a destination that can be leveraged for the good. Please don't jeopardize that. The presentation by NGF last
Sir, how much more do you have? Because, I mean, usually we only allow a few minutes.
1 minute.
1 minute? You can wrap this up in 1 minute? Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The presentation by NGF towards strategic planning for golf in Yarmouth last week was excellent. I ask that you follow their recommendations so that golf can be a source of pride for the community and contribute to the economic and cultural well-being of Yarmouth. Golf operations especially need your approval for the software technology upgrade as soon as possible to prepare for the 2020 season. This is more important than ever to help maximize revenue given the future wastewater project, which could affect its availability and resources. Thank you.
Okay. Just one quick comment. I mean, this forum is not to get into a debate or a dialogue with the public, but the Board of Selectmen did support those allocations for golf out of free cash. If you recall, somebody at the meeting from the floor moved to amend that to delete those provisions from the free cash supplement. So the board supported that and voted in favor of that recommendation.
And just one other point that was brought up, he mentioned that we considered cutting maintenance of $250,000. I don't recall that.
I don't either.
At all.
No.
Mr. Holcomb asked for it at the last meeting that they take it out of the budget.
That's right. It was a conjecture as to whether asked the question of what is our emphasis? Should our emphasis be on increasing revenues or reducing expenses? And they came back with, I think, a good response. Their response was, well, we believe that the emphasis should be on increasing revenues. And then I followed up by saying, well, then what will happen if we increase revenues is that the expenses will, in fact, be more in line. So even though they had commented that expenses are high at the courses, it's apparent that with emphasizing revenue growth, the expenses will fall in line. So I think that was the position of the board.
But thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Okay, I see no one else. So going on to the next item, which is a presentation to our Deputy Chief, Stephen Exaros. Deputy Chief, would you come forward, please? Deputy Chief, as you probably know through recent press releases, is going to be retiring from service from the town of Yarmouth effective on December 8th of this year. So this citation is dated December 8th because that's going to be his last day of working in this capacity for the town of Yarmouth. So I don't want anybody to be confused when at the end of this we talk about a presentation as of that date. The reason we're doing it today is because of meeting schedules and the deputy chief schedule. So this is the proclamation to Stephen G. Exaros. Whereas Stephen G. Exaros served proudly as a highly decorated member of the Yarmouth Police Department for 40 years before his retirement as Deputy Chief of Police on December 8th, 2019. While serving our community, Deputy Chief Exaros became widely known for his service to the town of Yarmouth. And whereas Deputy Chief Exaros began his career as a summer reserve officer in 1978 and became a full-time patrol officer in 1979, moving up the ranks within the department, starting as a patrol officer, followed by a detective / first school resource officer / youth services officer, moving on to become a patrol sergeant, lieutenant, and currently retiring at the rank of Deputy Chief of Police. And whereas Deputy Chief Exaros has attended numerous specialized training courses and is a graduate of the Babson College Command Training Course and the FBI Law Enforcement Executive Development Seminar. And whereas Deputy Chief Exaros is the recipient of 22 various police department awards and decorations, including Officer of the Year, Yarmouth Area Chamber of Commerce Person of the Year, Rotary Club of Yarmouth Vocational Service Award, Mothers Against Drunk Driving Officer of the Year, and the Barnstable County Human Rights Commission Rosenthal Award. Deputy Chief Exaros was a champion of the community with his continued support of the members of the community and military members. Wherefore, the Board of Selectmen are extremely grateful and officially recognize Stephen G. Exaros for his career dedication to benefit the residents of the town of Yarmouth on this 8th day of December, 2019, signed Michael Stone, Norman Holcomb, Tracy Post, Eric Tolley, and Mark Forst.
Wow.
Well done, well done.
That's so much.
You get a hug too, right? Chief, you get a hug too. Wonderful. I'd just like to say a few words.
Sure.
Watch him take out this.
Say as many as you'd like. 40 years is a long time.
It is.
Can I just add one thing before you begin? He's not really going that far away. There is a rumor that most likely he won't be any further from you than Boston. That's just a rumor. But go
Yes, that's a good rumor. Thank you, Mike.
You know, how do you leave a job and the people you love? It's very bittersweet. But I love being a police officer. And it's an exciting time to look back and look forward. But you folks and the people of Yarmouth have been by my side for over 40 years. And through the good times and the bad times, like losing Brad Erickson and Sean Gannon and my own son Nicholas, you have always been there for us. So I'm very proud. I can tell you that there are plans to keep serving, because that's how we were made. And on behalf of my family and everybody in this community, I want you to all know, wherever I go, my heart will always be in Yarmouth. So thank you. Thank you, Chief Frederickson, for being by my side.
Tracy?
I just want to say a few words. 40 years is an amazing career, and it's a very hard transition. I think anybody who's done something for so long, it's very difficult to leave something you love, as you said. But it's not the end. As I said to you the other day, I feel like it's just the beginning. You have a special way, and I'm going to just kind of speak for, I know a lot of the people of Yarmouth on here tonight, and you have a lot of people that support you. And you have an amazing ability to make people feel special. And through your time and through my time here, obviously we've become friends, but we've also had the ability to attend some things, and thinking back on some of the things we did and you've done was Secret Santa for seniors and the coats for veterans. And I think back about our time at the Mayflower Place, Christmas time of 2017, and the way you walked in there, and you make those people feel so special. And that's not a police officer, that's your character. And for those things and the way that you connected the community to the police department, I thank you very, very much. And on behalf of the citizens, I thank you for your service. God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you.
Chief?
With that being said, just to let you know, on December 6th, from 12 to 2:30, we'll be having an open house at the Yarmouth Police Headquarters. So we know that Steve is a little bit of an introvert. So everybody can come by, wish him well, and it should be a great day. And as working side by side with my brother for 40 years, it's bittersweet. I wish him the very best. He's meant for bigger and better things. And I can't wait to watch the show. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
It's funny you say that. Before I came here tonight, I was watching Fox 25 News, and your retirement, what you had posted was there, and I just started laughing because I said, of course it's on Fox 25 News. Who else could retire from this town and it would be on Fox 25 News but Steve? So.
Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, the next item is a hearing. This was an advertised hearing about the license of the Grand Cafe at 80 Route 28, West Yarmouth. I'll read the notice and then ask those present that are representing that business to come and take their seat at the front table. The Yarmouth Board of Selectmen, acting as the local licensing authority, has scheduled a license renewal hearing to determine if the annual wine and malt common vitular license held by Louis Pagay, doing business as Grand Cafe, 80 Route 28, West Yarmouth, Louis Pagay, manager, should be renewed for the year 2020. The hearing will be held on Tuesday, November 19th, 2019, in the hearing room at Town Hall, 1146 Route 28, South Yarmouth. The Board of Selectmen meeting begins at 6 p.m. Do you gentlemen want to identify yourselves?
Hi, my name is Carlo Calle. I'm the chef in the restaurant Grand Cafe, and he's my brother-in-law. We've been working together in the restaurant. I come to help him to understand a little bit, understand more than him the English. We will try to understand as best we can, and so we want to know what do we have to do, what are we here for.
Okay. I think I have the short answer to that. I want to bring the board up to date on the background of this matter. If you recall, some time ago, Mr. Pagay came in to transfer his license from himself as an individual into the corporate form. After many gyrations concerning that issue, the board finally did vote to allow that transfer. But when the packet went up to the ABCC, they were missing what they need, one document that they needed, which was the lease had to be in the name of the corporation. Linda spent many months trying to get them to do that, and they did not do that. Finally, the ABCC got sick and tired of sitting on the packet, and they returned it to Yarmouth in its entirety. But they indicated to Linda, well, let me back up before I say that. After this notice went out, Mr. Pagay came in with the proper document indicating assignment of the lease to the corporation. But the ABCC said, we still have, because of the time that is run on this matter, we still have to have you go back, have the Board of Selectmen approve the transfer again. It's a technical vote. If we do that, that pretty much resolves the issue. Otherwise, we were going to have a hearing tonight as to whether or not we were going to extend their license any further for this year. Now, here's the glitch. If the ABCC doesn't get to this matter and approve it by December 31st, the only thing they can do, or the only thing we can do, is issue the license to Mr. Pagay in his name individually. And then once the ABCC approves it, Yarmouth would transfer the license over to the corporation without a further hearing. Now, Linda Hill, our licensing clerk, went through all of this with the ABCC. I met with her today to go through everything. So what I would recommend that the board do is approve reapprove, rubber stamp, if you will, because the ABCC is already going to approve it subject to our action tonight, to reapprove the transfer of the liquor license into the name, from Mr. Pagay, into the name of the corporation. And then he's kind of on his own from that point on. If they approve it prior to December 31st, he'll get the license in the name of the corporation. If he doesn't, then the only option he'll have is to get to have his license issued in his own name and then transferred once he gets formal action from the ABCC. Can you explain all this to him?
Él está diciendo que todo lo que los papeles lo necesitaban, nos presentábamos y todo eso, que volvió. Y entonces ahorita lo que está diciendo es hay dos maneras que pueden hacer. Bien va a salir tu licencia a tu nombre, solamente como estaba saliendo, y después tratar de arreglar, dice. Pero ahorita dice que tiene chance solamente hasta el diciembre, en el 31, que puede ser cambiado a digamos, la corporación. Porque si ya saben que ya es cambiado.
Claro, ya va a estar
Cambiado, dice.
Entonces, sí, estamos de acuerdo con todo lo que estamos haciendo, sí.
Yeah, he say everything you say is right. You know, takes so long for all those papers because he had to ask for new lease. You know, fixing whatever was wrong on there. The Leonard he didn't send back. You know, as soon as possible. We asked for, but he never sent it. So now he got all the papers and then resend it. But whatever can help us, you know, it's gonna be okay. Like you say, he can get a license in his name and reapply again, you know, after New Year or whatever.
I don't believe he'll have to reapply again if the ABCC approves the transfer. See, they would have approved the transfer if he had cooperated and provided the lease right away. We wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
But because he didn't, and they waited and waited and waited, they returned the file to Yarmouth. Now, they told Yarmouth that they'll approve it, but because of the delay, we have to have a vote to approve the transfer to the corporation. But the problem is in the time of year, they're going to be looking at all the license renewals. The deadline for the license renewals is the end of this month.
Yeah, we are
So we don't know if they'll be able to get to this by December 31st or not. If they don't get to this by December 31st, we can't issue a license to the corporation. The only option we would have is to give him the license in his own name. Once the ABCC approves the corporate transfer, he wouldn't have to come back for another hearing. Linda would just issue him the license in the name of the corporation.
Okay, that's fine.
So, just to be clear, Mike, what was your recommendation to issue the license in his name or the name of the
No,
corporation?
all we have to do tonight, and then it's mostly administrative after that, is to, we have to re-vote to approve the transfer of his license from his name individually to the Grand Cafe Restaurant, Inc.
So you're saying our last approval was for him personally?
No, it was the same approval,
Why do we need?
but the ABCC sent the whole package back as if it didn't happen
Doesn't
because
our
he
vote
didn't
stand?
provide the new lease.
Our vote stands, though, right?
We have to re-vote it according to the ABCC.
What happens if we do nothing?
If we do nothing, then he would not be able to transfer his license to the corporation, and he would probably get his license issued to himself individually. But I don't really know why we would want to do that. I'm somewhat irritated that he took so long. There was a simple request to provide that lease, but when did you bring it? Last week? You brought the lease to Linda?
When first we applied, he provided all the paperwork, but he...
No, he didn't. He didn't provide the lease.
Yeah, we provide only...
Not in the name of the corporation.
Yeah, that was the problem. We didn't find out, you know, until they told us was supposed to be in the lease with the name of the corporation.
Yeah, but Linda said she contacted him several times about this, and he didn't do anything.
Cuando hicimos el paquete con él, él dijo que estaba todo bien cuando él envió. Y después hizo falta que dijo que
Yeah, es lo que
necesitaba.
decía. Yeah, he said, you know, when he begins, he provide all the paperwork, but after it was sent, they were asking, like I said, she was in the name that's supposed to be corporate. And he asked for the Leonor, and he took like 2 or 3 weeks to give it to us, and soon we tried to send it, but it was so late, so.
I'm pretty sure I was at a seminar that was held up in Buzzards Bay, and this case, without mentioning any names, came up before the ABCC. And that was back in August, and it was still a problem back then. But I think we got to move forward with this. If we vote to approve the transfer, we've done what the ABCC asked us to do. Now the question is, they're going to approve this, but I don't know if they can do it before the end of December.
What's the name of the license in is it bonded? Who's his insurance through? Who does the town hold the insurance with?
I
Him
think
personally
the
or
insurance
company?
right now is with him individually, but I'm not positive of that.
Well, it's my opinion, we've spent far too much, this business has had a license for approximately 2 years, and they've been before us, I think, 3 or 4 times already.
Well, I understand. I don't disagree with that.
So, having a license is a privilege. And when you don't do what you're supposed to do, I think that at some point in time, you have to consider your privilege.
I'll make the motion based on the chairman's recommendation to renew the license in the corporation's.
To allow the transfer of the
allow the
license.
transfer to the corporation's name, assuming that the state will get to it before the end of the year, and if not, then it will automatically be put into the individual's name, is that?
Until the transfer is approved by the ABCC, yeah. It's really more of a question of, it's a ministerial act, it's a paperwork thing, but, they just got sick of sitting on the file and they returned the whole file. Now Linda's got to really ship the whole package back to them as if they never applied before. So
I made the motion, but I agree with Tracy. We've seen you far too many times. I made the motion to get you out of here. I don't want to see you again. Honestly. I don't know what the problem is, but, I'm going through the records. There are 3 or 4 requests to get this information. And you wouldn't have had to have been here tonight, yet here you are.
And it's time-stamped in on November 7th, I guess. That's the first page of the commercial lease, which I have. So that's apparently when they finally provided it. But there is no, this isn't like a violation, obviously, of any liquor laws. It's just a question of sitting on their hands and not tending to the paperwork. After we voted to approve the transfer, they were missing this one document, and they didn't get it in time.
What I don't understand is why our original vote doesn't stand, why this needed to come back to us with.
Because the ABCC says we have to, because they're treating this package as if it never happened. They sent the whole thing back.
I'll second the motion.
All right. So we have a motion then to approve the transfer for Mr. Pagay of license individually to the Grand Cafe Restaurant, Inc. And we have a second. So all those in favor?
Just ask another question.
Yeah.
What's the benefit of the license being held to us, or liability-wise, for it to be in a corporation's name as opposed to an individual?
Great question, and here's the answer. If Mr. Pagay holds this license in his own name, then he has to be the manager of record. And because we've had problems with him before, we wanted him to designate another manager, which he can do if he holds it in the corporate form. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, so we voted to approve the transfer to the corporation, but we can't guarantee that you'll be able to get the business licensed in the name of the corporation before the end of the year. It's now got to go back up to the ABCC.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the board's patience. I know this on its face doesn't make a whole bunch of sense. It's a lot of technical bureaucracy, really, but it's occasioned by his failure to be cooperative.
And I think that if the ABCC does not take and approve it as a corporation, we need to consider the renewal of his license if it's him individually, because he's already proven that manager position is something that he's unable to do effectively.
All right, the next item. Yes, go ahead.
Isn't this the place where they get in trouble for after-hours drinking, and we had a whole issue with translating our
Yes.
policy?
Right.
Where is was it his son?
Cool.
That was his son, yeah. His son
He's
was,
going back to
I
school.
think it was at UMass Dartmouth, wasn't he?
He was only there for the summer.
Did we ever receive a copy of the translated
Yes.
liquor policy?
Yes. Yes, actually, Phil got it translated through Dartmouth College. They did it for him because he was an alumnus of that school.
You know, I had spoken in the previous meeting about, wanting to be helpful with people that are not necessarily speaking English well. And I think we talked about the condition of making sure that someone is available there on site that does speak English well. And, I'm concerned. What if somebody hollers fire? What'll he do? Will he dial he doesn't know what they're saying? Then he's not going to be able to dial 911 because he doesn't know that there's a fire in the kitchen? I don't know. Where is what's the end point for us?
We raised this issue when we approved the license, and Phil Magnuson voiced his concerns to the ABCC, not in that specific context, but in the general context of public safety. And they didn't respond, but they approved the license. And it's a tough one because on the one hand, you got to be very careful so that you're not accused of any kind of discriminatory conduct against somebody based on cultural or language barriers or things like that. But on the other hand, you got public safety concerns that you're raising, which are of paramount importance, I think. And I guess the answer is they can have a license, but they got to get somebody in the business that can communicate these things. Things that you're talking about and other things as well. Check somebody who knows math, simple math, to know someone's date of birth as to whether they're old enough to be served alcoholic beverages. There was a problem, a similar problem down at Becker's Package Store, and the ABCC went in there, and I believe it was that business, I'm not certain, but I think it was, and they found somebody that didn't check IDs, and there was a complaint for serving alcohol to minors. So.
Mr. Chairman, point of order. This was supposed to be a public hearing, right?
I don't.
What it says.
It was a public hearing on the issue of the license, yes.
Can I?
So I guess you can, yeah.
In view of what just was said, can the board ask somebody, I don't know whether it's the police or somebody, to periodically check in there and make sure that somebody is on the premises who understands English, unannounced?
Well, they
From
do.
time to
They
time?
do checks, and they treat them like everybody else. They're not going to ask if they speak English, but obviously they go in and make sure that their tip certification's intact, that their books and training are intact, and so on and so forth. So that definitely happens.
We try to inspect. I mean, there's been years when I believe there's been enough time and resources to inspect just about every business. There's other years where they don't, and they do as many as they can.
No, but in this specific case, I think,
But
as,
generally,
what Mr.
the
Holcomb-
way this comes to to the forefront is when the ABCC sends investigators in. And they're not really more concerned with someone speaking English or not speaking English. They see what happens, whether minors are being served or intoxicated people are being served or whatever the case may be. I don't think your inability to speak English is a defense to that. Then I think they go forward and they issue complaints.
Yeah, our issue with that was their knowledge of our rules and regulations when they were before us for a violation. That's where it came into play, that they didn't quite understand what their responsibilities were.
Well, that-
Correct.
You know, they make a claim, and you have to kind of accept it on face value, but that's why I think, I don't know if it's possible or not, just to check
No,
and see I mean, to
it's a
see
problem.
whoever is the manager at the moment in the restaurant, when an inspector walks in and starts speaking English, does that person understand English? You don't have to ask them whether they do or
But I
not.
think your point's well taken. I think we have to get certain businesses, we have to watch a little more carefully.
Yeah.
All right. Veterans Beat Sticker Policy, second hearing. Does anybody want to be heard on that? Okay.
Make a motion, we approve the regulation as presented.
Well, Jeff, wait a minute. Jeff, you want to say something?
I don't really have much to add. I'm here to
Silence
answer any
is golden,
questions. The
Jeff.
board seemed very supportive, so.
I second the motion.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second due to Jeff's brilliant presentation.
Better to remain silent and be thoughtful, you know that saying, you know?
No, that reminds me of
We were trying to make
We were
this
just trying to make
faster,
this a
not longer.
3-second,
no, that reminds me honestly of a case I once had where a judge told me, he says, "You're winning. Maybe you want to sit down." And so I thought about it because I had some other things I wanted to say, but
It was a good
I
indicator.
thought that it was a strong message. So, anyway, now Jeff's in that position. All right, so we have motion and second. All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? That's unanimous.
Excellent.
Golf
Thank
fee.
you,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Colby. Excellent.
Golf fee, second hearing.
Make a motion, we approve the golf fees as presented.
Okay, let's see if we have anybody in the public first. Anybody in the public wants to be heard on the golf fees issue? Other than,
Has anything changed?
Same, all the same request.
I'll second the motion.
okay, so we have a motion and a second on the golf fees. All those in favor? Aye.
Just a moment. Huh? Didn't ask for comments.
said, huh?
A question.
Do you have a comment?
I have a question.
Okay.
We received recommendations with regard to fees for the future,
Right.
and of particular note were the recommendations for a fairly significant increase in card fees. So I guess we'd be looking, if we follow the recommendations of the consultant, then we'd be looking at increases in golf cart fees for fiscal '21. Is that correct?
Well, because that would fall under the 5%, we would actually have to go to town meeting to lift that and go increase it above the 5.
Okay.
So this already
All right.
proposes the 5%, 22 to 2310, 1450 to 1523.
But we could always back out these fees out of the recommendations that were made by the consultant, right? So-
I'm not sure on that one, but from what I
Is that what
understand,
you're
it would
getting at,
have to
or-
go to a vote at town meeting to go above
Okay.
the 5%.
So in order to implement, your point is, it would have to go to town meeting
Right.
for adoption of those
Right.
increases that were recommended.
So that wouldn't, if that were to be the case, we wouldn't put that into effect until.
But that's 5% per
Okay.
year, though, right?
No, it's
No,
actually
this
more
would be
than
going
that.
above and beyond, just kind of like we did the same thing for the membership.
Yeah, they increased them on here, the proposed rates are
Right.
increased by the percentage
Right.
allowed. So
Right.
anything above that needs to have town meeting approval.
Yeah, anything above that for this fiscal year would have to be approved.
Correct. And,
Right, but
so-
if you deferred some of the increases into the following year, you could still do it if it was within the 5%, right?
Right.
Right, but the increase that Mr. Hogan was talking about is well beyond the 5%. They're talking $2 to $3 per cart fee.
Right.
Right,
Yeah, so it'd be in the nature of 15% or something of that nature.
right.
So that would require us to go to town meeting to get
Okay.
approval for that.
So that's something we're going to need to plan on if that's, we're certainly going to listen to the recommendations of the GEC on that. But I think that's something we would need to think about for town meeting as a warrant item if in fact,
Right.
In order to get that approval process going.
But assuming you did that at town meeting, you could still back out the fees you're approving tonight and just ask town
Well, I think it
meeting.
would be for the next year.
Yeah, that would
probably
go into
for
the fact,
2020.
well, we would actually,
Okay,
we would
you're
actually
right,
hold
yeah.
off
Right,
because
yeah,
we'd
yeah,
be in,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
yeah, we would hold off because we'd be in the middle of the season.
Yeah.
So it would go into effect
Right.
the following calendar year.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Any further discussion before we vote in favor of this? All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry you got so hasty there, Norm. Weights and Measures, intermunicipal agreement with Barnstable. Who's got that?
Representatives of the town of Barnstable will be coming up to do a presentation. It's in your handout.
Good evening.
Good evening. Mr. Chairman, board members, I'm Richard Scally. I'm the licensing director, which includes Weights and Measures Division for the town of Barnstable. This is Jane Silkevich. She is our sealer of Weights and Measures for the town of Barnstable. Hello. And I forgot to introduce her we had a hearing in Harwich last night, so that was my mistake, but I remembered this evening. She is the person who is the technical person who knows all the weights and measures issues with regards to her deputies as well as the other technical equipment issues as well. I am here to present to you a package which you have in your package showing the regional program that we provided to a number of towns for the last 20 years. Yarmouth was the original town that we started with in 1999. You were the very first one. And we provided that to you for the last 20 years. We now have 9 other towns that are signed on to do this as well, so we represent...
So it should be cheaper, right?
Well, you would think, wouldn't you? However, costs have increased.
Or not for the cost of inflation.
Yeah.
That's it, and personnel.
Don't help them, Mike.
Cost of living. So I have included in the packet for you the original agreement signed in 1999 and then updated in 2002. There's a number of documents in there. I don't really want to bore you with all of them, but just to go through the packet with you, we actually, just so that the public knows what we do, we are the sealer and deputy sealers that go out to the gas station dispensers, the scales, the scanners, the reverse vending machines, the oil truck meters, the price verifications, the UPC checks, all the things that we do out there for the public to bring equity to the marketplace, make it fair for consumers to purchase something and know that they're getting what they're getting and that it's labeled correctly. That's a very simple way of saying it so the public would understand what that means. We have not reviewed this agreement in 20 years with any of our towns, and unfortunately, in the last couple of years, we are in a deficit. And so, as opposed to increasing our fees to the businesses out there, we have proposed assessments to all of the towns. All 9 or 10 of the towns initially have approved of the concept. We're now in the midst of looking at the agreements with each individual town. Our town manager went before the Barnstable Town Council on November 7th and received approval from them to negotiate and sign the agreements with each town. In the packet, you will see a list of our fees that we charge to all the businesses here. That would be the same fees that every town, we would charge to every town business. you will see a list of all the businesses that we serve here in Yarmouth. It includes all of the businesses that we actually go to. There is a brochure in here which describes to the public what our services do, what we do. We hand this out at our Citizens Academy. We hand this out to all the town halls that we go to for all of the towns that are members of our regional service. The other documents that are in here are actually our revenues for the last fiscal year and by calendar year, and you'll see what we bring in for fees for Yarmouth, and then what we generally bring in for fines. And you'll see the total here is generally about $45,000 that we bring in just from Yarmouth. And that includes the calendar year versus the fiscal year as well. We have provided to you a document which shows basically the number of hours that we spend here in Yarmouth. They are broken down by fee and non-fee and fee-based hours. The first chart shows we spend about 139 hours of non-fee-based hours here in Yarmouth. And that's very difficult to calculate because there's travel time, and sometimes there's a fine, sometimes there's not a fine, sometimes we're not providing any violations or finding any violations in those particular businesses. On an average, we provide about 244 hours of fee-based device inspections for a total of about 383 hours a year. It's very difficult to calculate that on a numbers basis because it does change from year to year. We have provided inspection results showing that for the year, fiscal year 19, which shows exactly the violations we have found, the sealed and not sealed and condemned and passed devices. You'll see the list of those totaling the amount of money we brought in on those. We also are required to file an annual report for you, which we do to the state. There is a new state director for the Division of Standards, Mr. James Cassidy. He has taken over for the director who was there for 38 years, and so he is in there now kind of changing everything and updating websites and databases, and he's been ordered to do a number of things to bring it up to speed and to bring into the 21st century, the system there, which the state does not have. Jane can explain to you our database that we use. It is a very complicated and intricate database that we had our IT department design for us. It does calculate all the different data that we have and produce the reports that you have here. The director of Division of Standards for Weights and Measures has told us that there are a number of changes that will be made there. In terms of the numbers of towns that they will serve, they actually serve towns that are 5,000, that are under 5,000 population. They did have an option to serve or to provide the services to the towns from 5,000 to 20,000. They are now eliminating that service for about 17 or 18 towns and downscaling that service. In the report, you will see on the annual report the number of inspectors that we have, and there's Jane and there's 3 deputy sealers as well as myself. We are all certified. We are all trained to be able to do all the testing and equipment servicing that we have provided to each of the towns. All of our sealers have more than 8 to 10 years of experience. We are required to get our CEUs each year, to go to regional meetings, to go to trainings, and that's a very intricate system of doing that. The annual report provides a list of all of our equipment, so you'll see the kinds of equipment that you will be required to have, that we have to have for you, and those items, that equipment is sealed every year, and every 5 years. 3 to 5 years, the equipment has to be certified. The other reports that you'll see here are item pricing summaries. Jane can give you more information about that. We also provide to the state a savings to the consumer and a savings to the merchant on the items that on the inspections that we do. And you'll see that there's a savings of $128,000 to the consumer in our last report, and $55,000 savings to the merchants. So there is a comparison trying to help the merchant as well as the actual consumer in terms of savings for us testing the items or finding the violations. We have provided to you as well a copy of our invoice, our inspection and test report, just to show you an example about what we do and how we write them up. Those are all put into the database when inspectors come back to the office. There's a summary of how we do package checking, and those are by commodities, and you'll see that there's a number of different items that we do on a random basis and pick and choose if those items are indeed priced correctly. You'll see also a document for savings to consumers and savings on the price verification detail, on item pricing detail, and I'm happy to explain those more to you if you have questions about item pricing or price verifications. Jane can give you more information about that. So if you have technical questions about that, Jane is the person to ask. The more important piece of this is the last piece, which is the chart. All of our revenues go into a revolving fund. It is a fund that is we are self-funding, so we have to, there's obviously no profit from any of this. And our finance department and our legal department, as well as ourselves, took about a year to put this together to compare the costs and the loss that we have this year. So you'll see in the chart all of our salaries and all of our costs for all of our personnel. In the past, we have not included retirement. We are now looking for full cost recovery, including retirement in this. That's part of the reason why we've been losing money, is that we have not covered retirement. We're also looking to replace a number of trucks. Our trucks are 10 to 11 years old at this point, and they cost anywhere between $50,000 to $70,000 to replace. We also have a larger truck that costs about $150,000 to replace, and so we are in the midst of looking at that as well. So we're looking to build a fund for that replacement of equipment. You will see also, too, our operating costs are really very minimal besides the personnel. Personnel is obviously our heaviest, biggest operating expense. We spend about $25,000 in just repairs and paper and minutia of phone costs, cell phones. It's about $25,000 that we spend. The portion of the document that you will want to look at the very end shows the number of devices. We figured we would calculate the assessment on the number of devices for each town by percentage. That was the easiest way of figuring that. The non-fee-based hours would be very difficult to figure on percentages. So Yarmouth, we look at 438 devices a year, and there's a total of 3,899 devices that we actually look at on a yearly basis. We divided that up, and our assessment shows that we need to bring in about $148,000 in order to start to replace the trucks and equipment and cover our costs. And the assessment for the town of Yarmouth would be fiscal year 21, $15,375. We have put in an automatic 2.5% calculation, figuring for each year as it would go along, as a guide to not have to renegotiate every year. The idea is that the agreement would be a 3-year, a 1-year automatic renewal each year up to 3 years, and then there would be a total review of it in 3 years. We would not re-sign the agreement, but we would review it in 3 years. The total agreement would be for 25 years according to the statute. That would be the maximum that we could provide to you. At that point, obviously, we could renegotiate if that would be the case. But technically, it would be a 1-year automatic renewal and then a 3-year review of the agreement without having it to be re-signed. We are doing this with every town. I've gone to a meeting with every town manager, all 10 towns. We finally have had Falmouth sign on. We are just
Well, I
doing.
just noticed they only have 37 devices. How is that possible?
They have their own part-time sealer there. He has been there for a number of years. They are not willing to let him go at this point. He's not ready to retire. However, we have assisted in doing all of the oil trucks for the last number of years, so they have 37 meters on the oil trucks. So they have agreed to let us continue with those meters on the oil trucks, obviously at a reduced rate, because it's just 37 meters. I'm happy to answer any questions. I will let Jane speak too. I did all the speaking, but
Did good.
yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question. Thank you for this. And on the surface, I'm not in disagreement with what you're asking. But the obvious question that I would be remiss if I didn't ask is, how have you managed to operate within a specific budget for 20 years, and now tonight you come here to tell us that you're in a $150,000 deficit for 2020?
Well, we're actually $36,000 deficit this year, not calculating in equipment replacement or retirement. In order to calculate in equipment replacement and retirement, we would need to have the $148,000.
The bane of our existence is
Yeah.
OPEB.
So they're shifting OPEB to your,
Yes, they're telling us now they want full cost replacement, full cost recovery in the revolving fund.
That explains most of it.
Yeah, really.
And essentially, Barnstable has been covering it, all the costs that have been running it.
So I'm just looking at this last chart, and I think you said between, Yarmouth is good for, is it 45,000 in fees and fines? Was that the number?
Yes, that's with the fines, 45,000, which doesn't even cover one inspector.
Right. No, I mean, this is similar to other services that we contract out where it's much, much less expensive to have an arrangement like this than it would be to try to employ a position of this type ourselves. So, I think there's good value in the relationship. So I don't have any further questions. Thank you very much. It's a lot of information, but.
I'm sorry, it's very quick, very quick version. When I presented it to Dan, we did a whole hour of information to Dan, so.
All right, thank you.
well, my question is, I agree with Eric, we don't want to be in the business, that's for sure. So I appreciate all the services that you've provided, but why isn't this cost shifted to the business owner? I mean, when we set our fees based on what the cost is to the person. So unfortunately, we have to go up to cover the cost. So if you have X amount of expenses and it costs you $400 overall to certify that scale, why isn't the business having to, explain to me why the general taxpayer, and I know there is a public benefit, I know you're there to do the inspections and to keep it safe, but why shouldn't the business owner bear that expense?
Well, there's two reasons. Every town has asked this very same question. Our fees, number one, well, first of all, we're a regional program. So it's not like an individual town that would do total cost recovery for that one town.
Mm-hmm.
So we're providing it regionally. If we increased our fees are already the second highest in the state. And to pass that on to a mom and pop or a small business, we feel would be unfair. The benefit that we provide as a regional program is also a benefit to the individual towns and the residents of the town as well. So, in looking at it with our legal department and our finance department, we had to have options to bill many of the towns over the years. Yarmouth is not one of them, but some of the agreements allowed us to bill for hours or to charge an assessment, which we did not do over the last 20 years. So the real reason is that we really feel it's unfair to pass a higher fee on to a small business that may not be able to afford that.
No, and I understand that. We deal with that all the time when we have homeowners that come in here and, you know, the cost of a building permit, for instance, is extremely high, but it's the cost that it actually costs for them to get that service. So while it's difficult, I think that it's very important that the person who's getting the service is paying for the fee. I do believe that there is a percentage of that, a small percentage, that is unbillable when you do your inspections, when you do, you know, research for complaints. I definitely think that that should be covered generally, but I think the cost of the actual fee, whatever it costs overall for those inspections, that amount of time should be covered by the person who's getting the service for it. But it's a lot of information. I appreciate it. Like I said, we're grateful that you're there. Nobody wants to be in this business. I know that it's a lot of legwork when you have a complaint, a lot of follow-up, and making sure that the general population is protected, which is extremely important. So, thank you.
Norm?
Yeah, I thank you. Thank you for a thorough presentation on what you do and the revenue you generate and the expenses. You know, I think as far as covering the fees, there's a benefit that you're providing that is being received by the town, by all of our residents, and you know, that's really what it comes down to, and that benefit is very measurable to our population. So I don't have a problem with not increasing the fees to the businesses. I think that given the fact that there is a benefit to everyone.
There are proposed fee increases as well.
No, I understand.
I thought I saw that in here.
No, we're not proposing any fee increases at this time.
Yeah. So, thanks again. You know, I kind of wondered, you know, why there's not a county support, given the fact that you're operating on a county-wide basis. But you know, that's a whole other question, I guess.
There was some discussion about that. It's just the expertise and the amount of equipment, the county doesn't have that. So we would because we've invested 20 years in this program, we have all the expertise, all the equipment.
Sure.
None of the towns have any equipment from years and years ago. They would have to basically shift all of our people to the county, and that.
Yeah, and you're not asking for all that money, that all the deficit that was for the last 20 years,
right? We
to
could
be recovered.
Yeah, I mean, basically, you have to add up what could you afford to provide to your town with the revenue that you would get, and it would be almost impossible for every town to come up with equipment and a person for $45,000 just wouldn't happen. Yeah. So,
okay, great. Thank you.
Mark?
I have no questions, thank you.
Again, Jane is the technical, she's the one who does all the work, I do all the paperwork, so she's the expert in the...
I just have one question. When's the last time and how frequently have you passed on fee increases to the businesses?
2013 was the last time we...
Did you do that on a percentage basis? And if so, what was the percent?
I think it was 5%.
5%?
Across
Okay.
the board, yeah.
Okay.
But I think you said you look at what the fees are across the state, and we're already at the high end of that, right?
We are the second highest in the state. Jane and I are both she's on the regional, the Northeast Committee. Jane has been in the national committee. She's been, so they do a survey through the Mass Weights and Measures program. We have a whole charting out all the towns throughout Massachusetts as to what they charge, and we're the second highest. So,
do you know why we are at that end of the scale? Why we are higher, and are we significantly higher, or just are we talking a small percentage?
No, we're significantly higher.
And why is that?
Well, based on the territory that we have to have, again, the equipment and the travel, and, you know, somebody in a small town like Sherborne has you know, 2 gas stations, a deli, and a,
Just not.
you know, maybe a, you know, a taxi, I don't know. So that work essentially takes a person maybe a week to do, and without much effort, or, so they can get away with $20 or $30 a device.
How often do these inspections take place?
Once a year, mandated by Mass General
Once a year.
statute, yeah. If a device owner or business replaces we would go again. You know, they have to be certified if they replace or repair a device. So it could be a few times, but a cut and dry inspection is once a year.
I notice you inspect liquor stores. Who gets to do that?
We all
And
do.
what are you looking for?
We're checking their scanner system. So we take a random sample, we do a count, and we randomly take a item off the shelf, check the price, scan it, and verify the price.
I noticed that in some of these inspections, when you had samples of fees to individual businesses, some of them you go back to more than one time. In other words, they don't get all done in one day. Why is that?
That could be, like I mentioned earlier, about they got a new device that we had to go back for. A job like Stop and Shop or Shaw's is a very detailed job. We might try to do multiple inspections there to get them done. Their devices, which would be their scales, their price verification, like I just explained, package checking to make sure all their packed items are of proper label and weight, and their unit pricing is done. So we essentially do four different inspections at a large grocery store, for example.
And it may take multiple days to do. Interesting. All right, I don't have any other questions. I'm generally in accord with the comments of the other board members, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I thought that this was a fee increase table, but it's for
That's just-
multiple devices.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you haven't increased fees to the business since 2013, I feel that should be shared. I mean, I can understand the public benefit, but it is a cost of doing business, and I think personally that we should consider sharing that cost.
Are you asking us to approve the projected assessments through 2023 here tonight?
I guess the idea is that to, I guess, have you give your town administrator power to sign the agreement. It would be what we would be looking for. We need that approval to put into the document and to approve the assessment amounts through with the 2.5% increase per year.
I'll make that motion.
When does that have to be done by?
This would all begin actually July 1st for fiscal year '21. However, in my discussions with Dan, I guess is another portion of this, because we were originally trying to get this for fiscal year '20, he mentioned to me that there would be some portion of that Yarmouth could contribute. Yarmouth, Dennis, and Mashpee all mentioned, well, through their town administrator, but not through you, that they would be able to contribute a portion for fiscal year '20. And that amount was $4,032 for fiscal year '20 in a separate agreement.
Rich, have you looked at this? And has Ed looked at this?
So with regards to FY '20, that would come from an existing appropriation, and as regards to FY '21, we would build that into the FY '21 budget, which you will be seeing, the new assessment. But I do believe, Rich, that we need to, we have to get the final draft of the IMA from your town council.
Yep.
Our council has reviewed the draft, and it's gone back and forth a couple times. So a final vote on, a final version of the IMA would probably be what would be needed eventually. You don't know that you need a vote tonight, but just an indication that we're going to move forward with the IMA, correct?
As part of the agreement through our legal counsel, we are attaching our town council's approval for the town manager to sign, so we want also to attach to the agreement your Board of Selectmen giving your town administrator power to sign as well at some point.
None of the other towns have asked
I don't think we
that
have to
the
take
fees
action
be
tonight, do you?
Every
Every town manager has asked that very same question, and I've
But
given, and they
Nothing's
have
changed.
not asked.
I'd frankly be more comfortable in holding off on the vote until we heard from town council in terms of the final product. It's not that I have any,
No.
misgivings, other than we generally don't like to do that until our council has
Absolutely.
thoroughly vetted it.
Absolutely.
And I would like to know what, I was looking at, this is a 4-year thing so I would want to know exactly what the contribution for 2020 is, because this chart lists it as a projection with a value of $15,000. You said it's more in the order of 4,000 partial contribution?
Yes, I actually, because we didn't, only 3 towns volunteered, well, through Dan, if that's allowed through you, to contribute to the fiscal year 20 portion. We just gave a percentage. It's $4,032 that Yarmouth would contribute towards fiscal year 20.
Nice of him. I hope Dan can write you a check.
Again, that was his, he said I had to, come here to you, and obviously that was.
How many, you said there's 9 towns, right?
There'll be a total of 10 towns with Falmouth now.
With Falmouth. And how many have indicated they'll pay the partial payment for fiscal year 20?
Dennis, Mashpee, and through Dan, Yarmouth, so only 3 of the 10 will contribute.
Dan committed us before we had a
Well,
chance to.
He said it was possible.
Oh, he was possible, okay.
Possible.
So it was Mashpee, Dennis, and who else? Us?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
The IMA that'll be in front of you will be for FY '21, and
Yeah,
I
right.
guess we don't know the term of years yet, but up to 25 years.
Thought he said it was
We'll be making.
3 years with 3-year renewable terms. Isn't that what you said in the beginning?
It would be automatically renewable for each year. Up to, on the 3rd year, we would do a total review, but we wouldn't re-sign the agreement unless, of course, you wanted to. There's also a 90-day cancellation on either side, so if you decide at any time during 90 days, you can pull out of the agreement.
So years 2 and 3 would have the 2.5% escalator,
Correct.
and then it would be reviewed at that point.
It would be. And again, you can cancel at any time with 90 days' notice.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I also wanted to mention to you that we do the I do the licensing hearings, so I found your Grand Cafe hearing very interesting. We've run into that a number of times.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think interesting is a kind word.
Yeah, sorry to hear that.
We're usually much nicer.
Yes.
I noticed that the next item isn't, well, it's projected at 7:45. Are people going to be ready on that, or would you rather us do something else? You ready? Okay, why don't you come up?
We could hang out for half an hour, is that what you're saying?
No, we would skip ahead and do some other things, and then hang around for a while. It's interesting that we volunteered $4,000, huh? I appreciate your kindness.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Never know which way to go. Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Carol Ewing, co-chair of the Recycling and Solid Waste Advisory Committee. And this is
Jill Talley, the other co-chair.
And we have Roby Whitehouse, whom I'm sure you all know, adjusting your towel. Thank you. You want to go ahead?
Yep, okay. So we're here to discuss our recommendation of a polystyrene reduction bylaw. Just for clarification on what polystyrene is, it's a form of plastic that's based of styrene, neurotoxin, and probable carcinogens, which is a substance that promotes the formation of cancer and is known as poisonous, made out of chemical. It's typical, or in the form of expanded foam. It's used typically for takeout foods like coffee cups and takeout, any kind of takeout food used for packaging, and also used in for coolers and freezer chests. But it's more commonly known as the term styrofoam. So why is it that we're proposing this? It's well known as a health hazard when it's used as a container for food and it's heated. The styrene leaches out into the food, makes it very dangerous. And foods that contain higher amounts of oil and fat are even more dangerous, increasing the leaching into our food. It's not accepted as recycling at our recycling here at the disposal. It's not typically recycled. It's not easily recycled anyway, so it adds to our waste stream. It's very lightweight, so it often ends up in our environment and contaminates our beaches, our waterways, and it endangers our health and safety of marine life.
The bylaw we're proposing, I believe you all have a copy of it, is based on several others on the Cape, chiefly Orleans and Dennis. And I'll just run through quickly what the major points are. Clearly, it prohibits the use of containers for cooked or prepared food that are made of polystyrene. It's going to apply to all retail and food establishments. And that means, of course, restaurants, grocery stores, convenience stores, schools, as well as food trucks and concession stands and farmers markets. Basically, any place that prepared food is served. It also includes what are called counterparts that usually accompany the food in these containers. And this would mean cup lids, straws, plastic cutlery, that kind of thing. Excluded from this is the foam packaging used like peanuts and rigid foam styrofoam used for packaging like computer parts, that kind of thing. That would not be covered. Packaging like trays used for meat, raw fish, egg cartons, and also ice chests, which are usually often made, I should say, from styrofoam. As I said, these are the 5 towns that currently have bylaws banning polystyrene in food service containers: Dennis, Wellfleet, Provincetown, Falmouth, and Orleans.
Do those bylaws include the counterpart?
Almost all of them do. Dennis does not, but the others do. Currently, quite a bit of styrofoam is used in containers in Yarmouth. I did myself a very informal survey of 20 different establishments, and about 65% are still using styrofoam containers. Alternatives to these polystyrene containers already exist in the market. I did a quick Google search, and up pops mostly plant-based, compostable materials, paper, and other such things. There's also metal and other types of plastic containers that are recyclable, as opposed to the polystyrene. And I just heard on the radio the other day that Dunkin', beginning, I think, next month, is no longer going to be using styrofoam cups. So there's already a national trend towards no longer using styrofoam for serving food, and we hope that will be true in Yarmouth.
So just as we did with the plastic bag ban, we have intentions of doing outreach and raising awareness of the bylaw. We've already met with the Board of Health, and they supported it unanimously, recognizing the significant health impact or detrimental health impact that it has. Roby Whitehouse has reached out to the school department, spoken with the food service manager. The Chamber of Commerce has agreed to do a survey and help with communication to the community, the business community. And the health director has indicated that he'd be willing to include the information in their licensing so that the businesses are aware of it. And again, we would plan to do public meetings at libraries and at the senior center to help educate and answer questions. Also, there's a group that is already doing some research on working with distributors to get more information on what the alternatives are and help with possibly bulk buying and reducing any potential increase in costs that there might be for replacement for the polystyrene. And we remember that when we actually came here and spoke with you about the plastic bag ban, that we were actually questioned about the polystyrene and why weren't we considering doing something like that, because wasn't it more detrimental and wouldn't it make a bigger impact? So we're here today to respectfully ask the Board of Selectmen to place the bylaw on the town meeting in the spring.
I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Mark?
I'm curious, Roby, did you have any comments or anything to add to the presentation? I'm just curious. I mean, it's great that you're here, and I appreciate your work on this. But I'm also interested in hearing if there's any commentary you want to offer.
As a town employee, and the waste management superintendent, any effect that is going to create less waste that blows around in our environment is always helpful. As a resident of Yarmouth, I look to the environment on a regular basis to find solutions that will create less debris in our ocean. Certainly, we are right here on the ocean, and polystyrene is, again, one that we see on a regular basis floating around all over the place. But I think from my perspective also, I look at the health consequences. I see what happens to styrofoam when it is heated up and when food goes into it and it virtually melts. So I've looked at it from a lot of different angles, and as Jel mentioned, there is an organization that is doing research. I'm actually part of that group looking for solutions. I've been inquiring at a lot of our restaurants locally and trying to find some solutions that maybe we can all come to terms on that maybe will be more affordable.
That's great, thank you. I have a question for Rich. Has town council taken a look at this proposed bylaw yet, or is he waiting for guidance from us?
I'm not aware of that.
You're not aware? No, I'm very supportive of this, and I appreciate your recommendations. What I would recommend is that we, the town administrator, get over to town council for review, so we can have at least some legal review of it before we take it up for town meeting. But I'm generally supportive of what you're doing here. I think it's a sound approach. I'm assuming the proposed bylaw mirrors or reflects what's been adopted in other communities.
It's almost identical to Orleans.
It's identical to the
Almost,
Orleans?
yeah.
Almost?
Mhm.
And the difference would be where?
Yarmouth instead of Orleans.
There you go. Okay, good. Great answer. All right, that concludes my questioning. Thank you very much.
Norm?
Yeah, thank you. I'm supportive as well of the program. I guess I'm wondering why the exemptions are offered in a couple of cases, particularly to, I think about it in terms of you get a piece of steak or whatever, and it's got polystyrene underneath it, and then it's wrapped in plastic on top, and and all that gets thrown in the rubbish, afterwards. So is there some specific reason that those are exempted?
I think the reason they're exempted is the focus of this is on the heating or the hot food going into a styrofoam container.
Okay.
And that adds to, or reinforces the leaching potential of the styrene, which is the cancerous chemical. So I think that's why the focus to this point has been on mostly takeout containers and coffee containers, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case. Okay, thank you.
Tracy?
Thank you for this. I think it's great. One of the, I'm not so sure I'm sold on the counterpart scenario. I don't quite understand that, because that's not necessarily polystyrene, the counterparts. They're of other substance, so.
Yeah, some are and some are not. Yeah.
Well, if it's polystyrene, I would understand it. I mean, I understand the ones that are cups and bowls, but I think the straws and lids, you're into something other than a polystyrene bylaw. The other question I have is, the bylaw may be enforced by any town police officer. Our police officers do a lot of things. I don't think that they should be responsible to enforce our polystyrene. I'm sorry, what do you, stick them up. You've got a cup. I don't, I'm trying to envision where that would come into play. I think our health agent, perhaps, I think is great, any of the enforcement officers, but a town police officer, I'm not so sure that should be their job. But, yeah, I'd be interested in town council's review of this. Obviously, the survey of the business community, they were very, very supportive before. I just, I'm not sold on the counterpart scenario yet, but generally speaking, I appreciate it and thank you very much.
Kurt?
Thank you. Thank you for this. I thought this was great. I think it's great with the exception of the counterparts. I don't know if it was a deliberate attempt to slip straws and plastic cutlery in there, but I won't support this if that clause is left in there. I just think that we are a tourist destination. A lot of people rely on takeout food. A lot of people don't have access to utensils where they stay. And while you may be able to change the container that their takeout food comes in, you're not going to make them eat with cardboard forks and knives. So I don't think eliminating plastic cutlery is realistic. And straws, I have been to other states where cardboard straws are required, and they're terrible. So to Tracy's point, keep this at polystyrene, in my opinion, and I think you'll be fine. The other thought I had was, I guess we are now going to try to do fall town meetings, and I don't know, will this be petitioned, or are you asking us to sponsor this?
We're asking you to sponsor it.
I don't know that this would be the kind of thing that we would put on the spring town meeting. I don't know that for sure. I think these are the kind of things that we are trying to put to fall town meetings. We have a specific way that we're trying to break the types of articles up that go to each individual ATM and special town meeting. So I can't say with any certainty whether or not this would be appropriate for either, but I don't know. But I couldn't sit here tonight and give you any kind of guarantee that it would be on spring, but may very well be on the fall next year. I don't know. But so those are my only two things. I think a lot of restaurants already put their their takeout food in cardboard style containers. So it's really only the cutlery that concerns me. But thank you. Otherwise, I think this is great. Nice work.
I'm pretty much in accord with the concern that has been voiced by Tracy and Eric about the counterparts. It looks to me like that's just kind of an add-on that doesn't really serve the same interest as the polystyrene. And as Eric said, what are you going to, what's it, tourists, vacationers, they take out food, what are they going to use for utensils?
Well, I know, there's a few
what's the
places that have-
alternative?
There are alternatives
now.
Yeah, wooden, bamboo.
Yep.
Yep.
So I do have that same concern. The other thing is, I have a question on that part that it said it excludes foam packaging for transport, such as peanuts, packaging used for raw food, such as meat or fish, and egg cartons. Why are those exempted? What's the rationale for exempting those?
Again,
There must be a reason.
I think the focus of this bylaw is on preventing the leaching of the styrene, the health concern, as much as the litter concern.
The other thing that.
So no styrene, it will be leached if
It's leached mostly with the warmth of hot food. That's the real health danger.
I mean, do you have science that supports that?
Yes.
That it's only released if it's heated?
Not only, but we do have it that it is when it is.
Definitely.
We do not have the science specific that it is only.
The other question I have is if this stuff, and I don't know, if it's as dangerous as everyone says, why am I'm not hearing about a lot of lawsuits brought against the manufacturers of this stuff for people who have suffered from various forms of cancer?
You mean like the Roundup?
Yeah.
I think there may be issues about proving it, but I'm not sure. I'm not a legal expert.
I would think with all the products liability lawyers out there, the courts would be full of cases.
I can't help it.
I don't know.
I think the packaging also is like for meat, like if chicken, it comes from a distance, like it's one thing to control it if they're actually packaging it in a local store, but if it's coming from far away, how are you going to tell?
So you have a choice whether you want to have cancer or rotten chicken.
You can ask to have your meat wrapped in paper. That's another option.
From a practical perspective, anything that is wet, that sits on a store shelf like that for any period of time.
Usually there's leaching.
Polystyrene is really the only option. You can put it in a cardboard container and then leave it there for 2 days, even with the little meat diaper underneath it. It's still going to soak through.
Well, that's true.
Also plastic.
That's true enough, but I mean, I guess the fundamental question remains is how dangerous is this stuff, and if it is as dangerous as all that, why are there these exemptions?
There's
That's
also
the
personal
question.
choice too, so if somebody doesn't want to buy meat with the styrofoam underneath it, then they can choose not to.
Go to the grocery store.
Go to a
Still
butcher.
have butchers?
Yeah, they wrap it in paper.
Do they?
And by the way, Eric, cardboard knives? Is there such a thing as cardboard knives?
I didn't even think of wood or bamboo, to be honest with you.
I'm just curious what the other towns are doing. This has been a bylaw that's been established in other communities with
Right.
this language in it.
Right.
So I would benefit knowing what Orleans is doing and some of the other communities that comply with this. They must be doing something.
I've reached
comply
out
with
to
this.
Orleans. I haven't heard anything.
Well, it's not in
to
effect
this
yet.
point.
I
It's
mean,
not in
they've
effect there.
passed it, but the reality is it's not being
But there must be
enforced.
some discussion about how they're going to comply with this and what they're planning on doing. I went to Dunkin' Donuts today, and I normally get every morning a styrofoam, large coffee, and today, paper, automatically. So, and with a very different lid on it. So they're already moving.
I think national chains are looking more and more to do. I went to
Yeah.
the 99 in my little survey, and
Yeah.
I talked to the manager, and he said, yes, we're using it now, but I know that's going to change in the future.
I think there would be some benefit in knowing how communities are anticipating complying with this or seeing compliance with it. I think it would be helpful to know that information because
very helpful.
I think businesses are moving much faster and further along than we give them credit for. And I'm curious, Mary, you're here. Do you want to comment on that?
Worried about the grocery stores when we eliminated plastic bags.
Well, Mark, I think you're completely right. I think businesses are pretty much ahead of us. They know that this is coming down the road. If they're not already implementing other products, they know that they're going to be, if not required to, they desire to do that because they know it's the right thing to be doing. So like Jill was saying, there is a group on the Cape that is looking for alternatives and to be looking for bulk purchasing for businesses so that it can reduce their cost if they do need to do this. And so hopefully we can be part of that.
Thank you. I mean, what I'd like to recommend, Mr. Chairman, is that we move this forward to Town Council for review and to come back to us. I would agree with Eric that I think that language regarding counterparts is an issue, but I would be open to reviewing that or reconsidering it, provided that we get better information about how the business community is going to comply with this. If there's a huge compliance issue, then I think in Yarmouth we've got a problem. But if I see great progress in business in terms of dealing with this. We may very well find that there are solutions already on the way that are going to be available for compliance with this.
Well, one thing we want to do is actually reach out to the business community with alternatives, because they exist, even for forks, knives, and spoons. So they're there. It's just a matter of educating people to that.
I think that any bylaw that we move forward with, obviously, is going to go through town council. I'm not sure that it's ready for that at this point. I think we have to have some further discussion, read it in detail, see if there's any provisions that the board does not support, and if so, maybe get some votes on that, and then find out what we do agree to, what we are willing to propose. Once we finalize that, it'll go to the town council, but I don't expect that process to be very involved. I mean, from what I'm hearing tonight, the concerns are mostly with the counterparts portion of this. So.
Well, I prefer not to vote on a bylaw until we've had council review of it, so that's my position.
Yeah, in all due respect, I think the process is kind of reverse. I mean, whether he approves or doesn't approve language doesn't mean that the board's going to support it. I think we first decide what we're going to support and then send it to him. But in any event, I don't think we're talking about an extensive process.
Our general concept is supporting with those issues, but I think further public input, further business input, and then come back to us, and we can perhaps make a more definitive decision with that information in the near future.
I agree, and with what you recommended, Mark, is to see how other towns are dealing with this and what substitutes they're offering. To get that input as well, I think would be important.
Okay. Yep.
So, but I,
Way to do that.
from what I take of this, there's general support. There's probably some minor matters that have to be vetted and further discussed, and some input from with the alternatives that would be available for these businesses, and also the experience that other towns are having with it.
With enforcement, is that what you're particularly
Well, that's
concerned
another issue. Yeah, I kind of agree with Tracy in terms of we got to do, I don't know the answer. I think we have to think about that. Do you really want to put that onus on the police? Are they really going to have time for that?
That was a standard phrase,
How
I
would
have to say.
Well, actually, the language goes beyond the police. It basically is wide open. It says police, enforcement
It should say
officers.
enforcement officer, but.
Yeah, and it should be very targeted to the extent that it can be more targeted. That would be great.
I've had conversations with Bruce Murphy, and he's very supportive of this.
Who?
Bruce Murphy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
So
is he
as health
comfortable-
agent, I think.
Is he comfortable being the enforcement officer?
Yeah, well, yes.
Sure you will.
Can I speak for him?
Okay.
Yes. He
We'll give him a
realizes.
styrofoam badge.
Yeah, I think he is, so.
Okay, that's good. Well, he's got the job.
Okay.
Yeah, so there are those details we have to have some further discussion with, but I really appreciate the work you've done on this, and for you coming in here tonight and give us a very nice presentation. It's very clear.
Thank you.
Very understandable.
So we'll try to get back to you then with more information?
Yeah,
Is that
sure.
what you would like? Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Board and committee actions.
There are none.
No board and committee actions.
No,
We have
you
some
start.
minutes, June 18th, 2019.
I move them.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
Abstain.
One abstention, 4 in favor. Agenda review.
The committee handbook and the goals on the same night.
Wow. Could be a long night.
That's going to be a humdinger.
So which one?
Can I move them now?
I thought at the last meeting we talked about getting an update on communications and TV. Where did that go?
It's in our communications.
Oh, is that what it is?
I guess it fell off the edge.
I don't see it. Maybe I'm going blind here, but I don't see it anywhere.
I think Dan said that we're working on the FY21 budget, and he has a budget update on December 17th, and there's
That'll be part of that discussion?
items related to that in that presentation.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can tell you,
Please.
our broadcast live tonight, our issues with Comcast have been resolved, and Comcast had some issues at their head end at their office due to some vendors that they had in their office that
Was that the same issue that we had at town meeting?
apparently,
Okay.
and they're tracing that one down as well.
You know, has the quality of the broadcast changed? Because I think that was one of the
So
basic.
while they were here today, there is a device called a modulator, which is a Comcast device, which we hit up the technicians on, and they're gonna be getting back to us hopefully tomorrow on getting a new modulator, which should help the graininess of the video.
Okay.
We'll have to keep pushing on that one. But at least we're live for today.
So you'll be able to see your sex offenders clearly.
Oh, good.
More
For those,
clearly.
for those that are at home watching, yeah. Well, then there's the whole other conversation about just programming and getting other stuff. I'm really concerned about all the water quality work that we're doing. It's available on a YouTube video, but we should at least get some of that stuff, up on the regular cycle. Other towns are getting regular community business on their channel. And again, we got to do other things, but that's for later.
No, I agree, and I think Norm has raised through emails and stuff some questions and complaints that people have had about the failure of the videos and the quality of them. I think it's definitely something that needs attention.
Yep.
Serious attention. So that's going to be on the docket for the 17th, right? Or some,
It's an element of the budget presentation, yeah.
as an element of the budget presentation. Okay. So no meeting on the 26th of December 3rd. Next one is December 10th. We have a swearing in of the new Deputy Chief of Police. And goals again, Board of Selectmen goals. Committee handbook. Route 6A corridor improvements. An update from YRAC and CPC. Norm, you had some good points about this issue of the CPC funds. You made some comparisons.
Yeah, I did. I think there were some that in connection with the presentation we had last week from CPC. I went back and looked at some of the history of the CPA charge and our tax levy, and looked also at the trend in our tax rates. If you go back to 2006 or 2005, which is when the CPA surcharge was passed, our tax rate at that time was actually for the fiscal 2006, our tax rate was under $6 per thousand. So that's when the CPC or CPA surcharge was passed. Our tax rate now is $10. So there's been a substantial increase in our tax rate over that period of time. And I think that's one of the things that certainly is an issue that's been discussed by this board, is the need to hold our tax rate in control and to avoid substantial additional increases that might drive people out of town or might make it more difficult for people to afford to live in town. The other, I produced a chart showing the trend, the total tax levy since 2004, and the CPA surcharge. And, there's kind of we think of the surcharge as being a percentage, 3%. Well, what's it 3% of? It's 3% of the levy. So, or of the tax on the levy. So what has happened is that in 2006, the total CPA surcharge was roughly $1.1 million. And in 2020, it's $1.9 million. So there's been an increase of over $800,000 in the total CPA surcharge. And so the CPA surcharge has received the benefit not only of our normal increases in taxes, but any substantial increases that have been voted for school budgets, major construction budgets, et cetera. So there's been substantial inflation in the CPA surcharge itself. So, and I guess I look at that and say, all right, well, if we again tried to moderate that, and I think there's one other point. I looked at some of the comments that were made at the last meeting, and I think one gentleman commented, well, gee, the CPA surcharge is a major capital program on the part of the town. Well, that's exactly what the sewer system is. It's a major capital program, so it's entirely appropriate to devote substantial funds and from existing sources to that capital program. So I guess those are the comments that I would make at this point.
Okay. So those will come up, I guess, when we have further discussion on follow-up of last meeting with CPC. Does anybody have anything that they would like to add on? We have two more meetings, the 10th and the 17th from this year. December 10, December 17, 24 and 31, there's no meetings.
So on the 10th, the WASRAC, what is going to be discussed at that?
I'm not real sure. Rich, do you have any insight on that?
So the Water Resource Advisory Committee will likely be having a meeting at the beginning of December. Before that December 10th meeting, we'll discuss what to provide for an update. But they do have two specific recommendations likely that they would want to present, which is a cost recovery plan they have adopted or are recommending, and a position on participation in DHY, which would lead into your discussion on the 17th.
So the DHY discussion is on the agreement, right, to try to get us further along?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Has there been any further discussion of, I'd raised a question about the transportation of sewage across the Bass River, and the concerns I have with regard to having a duplicate system so that we don't end up with let's say there's a pipe damaged on the dentist side, and all of a sudden we can't pump sewage across the river. Where does it go? And what if it then pumps into the river? Do we have any backup? And I guess I didn't get what I consider a satisfactory answer to that. I'm very concerned that we don't have a duplicate system crossing that river.
They might, I don't know. I recall, though, asking them a question as to whether they anticipated going to the dentist plant over the Bass River Bridge or going up High Bank Road that way, and I don't think they had made any decision on that.
Well, I think there were two crossings contemplated. One going over the Bass River, and then one going back over to get to the Bass River Golf Course over High Bank Road. So there were really two crossings, both of which would be problematic in my view.
You'd have to cross the river either way, yeah.
So it's a question that I posed to our engineering consultant, and he should be available to discuss that issue. did have some comments, but I'd let him present those. I guess the overriding comment would, well, we'd have a similar issue if you were going over the Parkers River to our own plan.
Right.
Yeah, but that's not a good answer.
No.
True, but what's
no, I don't think it is a
what's
good
the
answer.
mediation in either event, I guess, would be the,
Well, my concern, it's okay, well, if the mediation is double the lines, what's the cost of that?
Right.
And is it something that we should be looking at and saying, okay, that's not a cost we had anticipated in going over to a dentist plant? Would we have the same cost going to our own plant?
I think it might be helpful at that meeting just to get clarity on how we're dealing with this. You can at least alert the engineer.
so Dave Young is aware of that question. He ought to be able to respond to it. The other piece of that I gathered in my brief conversation with him on the issue is that these types of crossings, there are automatic shut-off and various valves along the system at various points. That's true. And this would certainly be one of them, I would imagine, but he can attest to that. And that would be one of the design elements that you need to consider, so.
I guess I'm still struggling with the issue is, if you stop it, where does it go? You know, what's the fail-safe in the system? I mean, you can't just put a stop to the flow without either a reservoir or some other containment method. And I'd like to hear about that.
That's an excellent question. Okay. So if anyone has anything they want to put on for the 10th or 17th, just email me, let me know. And otherwise, we'll pretty much stick to this agenda, okay?
The only thing I noticed on this agenda for 2020 is the town administrator annual review is in January.
Yeah, well,
That surprises me, because typically we did it right before the election every year.
No, we stopped that because of when Dan was hired. We do it annually.
For his annual?
Mhm.
All right, so it was just the other town administrators because they were here every year, or? I mean, we always did it right before.
Right, we did it right before elections, so
Yeah.
that if anybody were to leave, that they would have the opportunity. But when Dan came on board, we started doing it on his yearly anniversary.
Okay.
Well, and, you know, you can always convert over to a different time frame
Oh,
if you
it's
want,
good.
but there has to be some sort of adjustment so that, you know, that's taken into account.
Well, might coincide nicely with his contract renewal, so.
Yeah.
And when, is that in January as well?
it's in late January.
Okay.
I don't know the exact date, but
Okay.
Eric and I are supposed to meet with him tomorrow, start that process.
Okay.
And then we,
It was last week.
no, we had a prior date, but something came up, and I think Dan was it Dan who had to change it? So we went to this date, and then we're hoping to meet twice in December, right before these meetings.
Well, we have to. I mean, if it's January.
Yeah.
If
And
there's a
so
problem, then we have no.
We're hoping to conclude everything by, Eric and I, probably by December, late December, and then we'll be meeting with the board.
Well, I mean, I'm assuming it'll take 2 or 3 meetings to get to the point where we're ready to come before this board with something.
Yeah.
My concern is that if there's an issue, that it's not leaving us enough time to prepare for an alternative, if that's
Which
the
is our
case.
alternative.
Okay, all right.
You're our issue. You're our issue
No,
fix.
I'm not saying there is, I'm just saying that's not giving us a whole lot of time.
There's always Bob Lawton, too.
We'll put it on your act.
We'll get him out of the mothballs. Okay, so, anybody have anything else on this before we move forward? No? Okay. Individual items. Mark, do you have any individual items?
No, other than to just echo the comments earlier, I think we started the meeting on a somewhat bittersweet note with Steve Exaros and the proclamation and an opportunity to give him our best wishes and appreciation for all his hard work. I just want to add the fact that you know, I got to know him when he was first in the schools as a resource officer with my kids when my kids were in schools. And I was just amazed at how quickly they got to be friends with him in the school department as a resource officer. And then I've just following him over his career and the work that he's done. You know, what's amazing in this town is the relationship that this community has with its police department. It's a relationship, quite frankly, that's exceptional. It's quite unusual. It's different than in most other communities. And I think, you know, Yarmouth's been blessed by having very strong leadership in the police department over the years. And I think, you know, Stephen has been an important contributor to that. And there are lessons to be learned by some of the outstanding work, particularly community relations, community policing. There are communities around the Commonwealth and around the country that have abandoned or sort of walked away from a lot of lessons in terms of community policing. But I think Yarmouth, you know, has set a standard and has stuck with it. And I think a credit is obviously to the leadership. And, you know, I've said this to Stephen before, that his contributions to Yarmouth are noticed and well beyond this community. He's been, quite frankly, a leader nationally and a leader in the state in terms of helping promote a very visible police department and a very strong relationship between police and the community. And I think that's something that I just felt I just wanted to get out there and wanted to state. So I think his appreciation and his recognition for what he's done for police is clearly national in nature, and it's been, I think, applauded not only by people or appreciated by people in this community, but by people all around the state and around the country. So I just wanted to state that and wish him well.
Norm.
Well said, Mark. I would just add to that, you know, we have on our schedule December 10th the swearing in of a new deputy chief of police, and I think it's a credit to the department and to Steve and to Frank for developing people within the organization, providing that future chain of command, and finding quality people is really difficult. And I think it's a real credit to the organization that they've been able to develop people within. So, Steve will be very much missed. But I did also want to talk a little bit. I was encouraged to watch the YouTube video, which I was finally able to pull up this morning, of the early part of the last meeting that I didn't make, and watched the discussion of the license to the Smugglers Beach, or the Ocean Club. And I've talked with a couple of people about that since, and people react, they say, why are you doing that? I mean, you know, if I build something on my property that goes over the line onto my neighbor's property, all hell breaks loose. You know, I've either got to deconstruct everything I built, or I've got to come up with an agreement to swap something with my neighbor, provide them with compensation. Likewise, I think in our town, we're very strict with our zoning regulations. And we have a very strict historic district. And our residents see that and say, why should the town be giving away property rights or licensing property rights when we're forced to toe the line in every conceivable way? You know, if we build a deck and it's not according to the building regulations, you've got to tear it down and rebuild it. Well, in this case, they built a deck on town property. And you know, it's a private enterprise. It's a condominium association. I'm not sure why we believe that we have to provide any kind of dispensation to them. I personally think they ought to tear it down. just like I'd have to at my house if I built on my neighbor's property.
Glad I don't live next door to you.
Well, I think, Norm, I think the reason why the Conservation Commission was supportive of some kind of agreement, license agreement, was because the level of disruption was a concern to them. So in fairness to the parties.
To the environment.
Yeah, is that they were concerned about actually scaling all of that bulkhead back in what it would do to the resource. So that's why they were supportive of the approach that was presented.
Well, they wouldn't
to the
be
board.
supportive if it occurred in my neighbor's backyard.
I hear you.
Anything else?
No.
Tracy?
Thank you.
I think to that point, it was said last week also that we've used licenses before. I only remember using the license one other time, and it was to have the construction people utilize the property at the old drive-in site. And I find it very appropriate to utilize a license for a temporary situation, but I don't believe the town administration should be directing people to utilize a license for a permanent solution. So just for the future, I don't think supporting a license for a permanent solution is a good thing.
I agree with you.
I was at the school committee last night. They haven't begun their budget, but I did take the opportunity to thank them, and through them, thank the town of Dennis. We should have done this last week when we met after town meeting. But I think it's important that we thank the people of Dennis for their support in the new regional agreement, and it's nice to be able to have that resolved temporarily. Brian last night talked about continuing to meet as a group, and so there is more work to be done, and I think they acknowledge that, and they'll continue to do that. But for everybody's work that went into that, I'm very, very thankful, and especially to the people of Dennis. So, and happy Thanksgiving. We won't meet again until after Thanksgiving, so I think it's important that everybody enjoy their family. There's a lot to be thankful for, and I'm thankful for the amazing community that we have, and I hope everybody enjoys their Thanksgiving. Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving. That's all I have.
We have that Barnstable letter. Is that in our folder?
The town of Barnstable?
Yeah, we have a letter
Oh,
to be
it's in
signed.
it's in the packet. It's to be signed, yes. Oh, for Jim Crocker?
Does everyone sign that?
I signed it.
I haven't seen any of
You
that.
want to circulate that so we can all sign it?
You two came in at the...
You mentioned when you said a letter.
No, I'm a week behind on everything. Last week I meant to
You
talk about
reminded me of the,
before.
you reminded me of the Crocker letter that we have to sign.
It's in there.
I'll move the consent agenda.
Second?
Consent agenda, yeah, we have to sign off on those documents as well.
Do we need a vote on those, a separate vote on those? or
No, we're
not?
just going to move the consent agenda, and if that's the case, then we just have to execute the document. So we have
There's a few items in the consent agenda that aren't in the packet tonight. One of them was the ratification of,
I believe it was in the packet as a separate item.
okay.
My memo with signature pages and the MOAs that were previously approved have been ratified by each union and signed by those members. And so it's presented for final ratification by the board.
Okay, we got a letter from, say that something was to be approved on the consent agenda that wasn't on the,
Yeah, it was the ratification.
okay.
So do we have a motion and a second on the consent agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, so so don't forget to sign on the contract, on the signature pages of the contracts before we go.
There's 7 of them, I think, so.
Town administrator items, we won't have,
Well,
unless Rich has any.
We're all very busy,
Okay.
hard.
So I don't see anything else. The only thing I'd like to do by way of public comment is agree with Mark's comments about a deputy chief and thank him for his many years of service to the Yarmouth community, and also to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 We're adjourned at
Good timing, Mr. Chair.
Wow, look at that, 8:10.
8:07.